Good day, I'm Andri, and I do welcome you to my second part of Essential Philosophy readings regarding Hindu philosophies, Shankara's Epistemology and Theodicy in particular. In his short life of 32 years, Shankara achieved that specific and very sublime union of sage and saint, of wisdom and kindliness, which characterizes only the loftiest type of man produced ever in India. Shankara was born among the studious Nambudri Brahmans of Malabar. He rejected the luxuries of the world, and while still a youth, he became a sannyasi, worshipping unpretentiously and very dedicatedly the gods of the Hindu pantheon, and yet he was mystically absorbed in a vision of an all-embracing and all-encompassing Brahman. It seemed to Shankara that the profoundest religion and the profoundest philosophy were those of the Upanishads. He could pardon the polytheism of the people, he could pardon the atheism of Sankhya in some kind of measure, or the agnosticism of Buddha. He was some kind of very intellectually elegant thinker, and he was crowned with honors, with the highest honors at University of Benares, and with a retinue of disciples. He championed Brahmanism in all the debating halls across India. At Benares, probably, we are thinking so, he wrote his famous commentaries on the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, in which he attacked with theological ardor and scholastic subtlety all the heretics of India and restored Brahmanism to that position of intellectual leadership and status from which Buddha and Kapila had deposed it. Now, you can see that there is so much metaphysical wind and cycling in these discourses and arid deserts of textual expositions, but they may be forgiven in a man who at the age of 30 could be at once the Aquinas and the Kant of India. Like Thomas Aquinas, Shankara accepts the full authority of his country's scriptures as a divine revelation, the same way as Aquinas did accept, of course, and then slides forth to find proofs in existence and experience of this world and reason for all scriptural teachings, the same way as Aquinas was postulated his famous 5 ways toward God. But unlike Aquinas, he does not believe that reason can suffice for such a task. On the contrary, Shankara wonders, have we not exaggerated a bit the power and role, the clarity and reliability of reason itself? One Indian sage, Jaimini, was right by pointing that reason is a lawyer and will prove anything we wish. For every argument, therefore, it can find an equal and opposite argument, and its upshot is a skepticism that weakens all force of character and undermines all values of life. It is not logic that Shankara says we need insight, the faculty of grasping at once the essential out of the irrelevant, the eternal out of the temporal, the whole out of the part. And this is the first prerequisite to philosophy. The second prerequisite to philosophy is a willingness to observe, to perceive, to inquire, to think for understanding's sake, not for the sake of invention, wealth or power or any other additional reason. It is kind of withdrawal of the spirit from all the excitement, biases, and fruits of action. Thirdly, the philosopher has to acquire self-restraint, a sublime patience, tranquility. He must learn to live above physical temptation or material concerns. And finally, what Shankara did say, that there must burn deep in philosopher's soul the desire for moksha or liberation, the liberation from ignorance, for an end to all consciousness of a separate self, for a blissful absorption in the Brahman of complete understanding and infinite unity. In a word, the student needs not the logic of reason or power of reason so much as a cleansing, a kind of deepening discipline of the soul. This fact perhaps has been and certainly stayed as such the secret of all profound education. Shankara establishes the source of his philosophy at a remote and very subtle point, never quite clearly visioned again until 1,000 years later, Immanuel Kant wrote his Critic of Pure Reason. Now, he asks, is knowledge possible? How we can attain knowledge? How we can attain a certain knowledge? Apparently, all our knowledge comes from the senses, from the experience, from the world, and reveals not the external reality itself, but our, let us say, sensory or sensorial adaptation, perhaps transformation, we might say, of that very reality. By sense, then, we can never quite know the real, the thing in itself, as Kant was pointed later on. We can know it only in the garb of space, time, and cause, which may be a web created by our organs of sense and understanding, both together, designed or evolved to catch and hold that fluent and so subtle and elusive reality whose existence we can surmise, but whose character we can never objectively describe or catch. Our way of perceiving will forever be inextricably mingled with the thing perceived. This is not some kind of foggy or some kind of strange or morbid subjectivism of the solipsist man who thinks that he can destroy the world just by going to sleep, for example. Our world exists, Shankara said, but this world of ours is Maya, not delusion, but phenomenon, an appearance created partly by our thought. Our incapacity to perceive things except through the film of spectrum of space and time, these two subjective and objective realities, as Kant was pointed, or to think of them except in terms of cause and change, is an innate limitation. Shankara said, avidya, ignorance, which is bound up with our very mode of perception and seeing things, and to which all flesh is hair. Maya, phenomenon, and avidya, ignorance, are the subjective and objective sides of the great illusion by which the intellect supposes that it knows the real. It is through Maya and through avidya, through our birthright of ignorance, that we see diversity or a multiplicity of objects, and also we see a flux of change, perpetual flux of change. In truth, there is only one being written with mayuscula, and change is only a mere name for the superficial fluctuations of forms, like the river of forms, like a Heraclitean element in Shankara's philosophy. Behind the Maya, or veil of change and things, to be reached not by sensation or intellect, but only by the insight and our intuition of the trained and skillful spirit, is the one universal reality, and that is Brahman. This natural obscuration of sense and intellect by the organs and forms of sensation and understanding bars us likewise from perceiving the one unchanging soul that stands beneath all individual souls and all individual minds. Our separate selves, visible to perception and thought, are as unreal as the phantasmagoria of space and time. These two subjective and objective realities and individual differences and distinct personalities are bound up with both body and matter, and they belong to the kaleidoscopic world of change and of flux, and these merely phenomenal selves will pass away with the material conditions of which they are essential part. But the underlying life, this hidden life which we do feel in ourselves when we forget space and time, when we forget secondary qualities and accidents and all this cause and change, is the very essence and reality of us, that Atman, which we share with all selves and with all existing things, and which undivided and omnipresent, yet presented. Is it identical with Brahman, with God? But Shankara asks himself what God is. Just as there are two selves, the ego and the Atman, and two worlds, phenomenal one and the nominal one, so there need to be two deities. And Ishvara, or creator, worshipped by the people through the patterns of space, causality, time and change, and the Brahman, or pure being, worshipped by that philosophical piety which seeks, which finds behind all separate things and all selves one universal reality, unchanging amid all changes, indivisible amid all divisions, eternal despite all vicissitudes of forms, all birth and death. Polytheism, even theism, belongs to the world of Maya and Avidya. They are forms of worship that correspond to the forms of perception and forms of thought. They are as necessary to our moral life as space is, as time is, as cause. They are necessary to our intellectual life, but they have no absolute validity or objective